Good afternoon, everyone. So, the topic is why data security is important and role of DLP in it, which is data leak prevention, data loss protection. So, we are discussing why keeping our data safe is important and how DLP helps with that. In simple terms, basically, data security is about protecting your data from unauthorized access, right? And which is important from both individuals and business point of view. My name is Krishna, and I have 9+ year experience in design and deployment of identity and access management and cybersecurity solutions. Okay, before implementing or before knowing about DLP, let's first understand data. What is the data, right? Because if you don't know your data, you will not be able to protect your data, right? So understanding your data is important. What is the data in your organization, right? And why it is important to secure your data. Let's see what's happening around the world. So in a blog published by LastPass, it was mentioned that a software engineer's corporate laptop was compromised, right? And which allows the unauthorized attacker to get the access to their cloud-based environment. They were able to steal the source code, technical documents, and even the LastPass internal system secrets, right? So, but this is not the only data breach that happened, right? There were lots of data breaches happened, and if you attended yesterday's keynote session, you must have heard like in every 39 seconds there is a data breach is happening, right? So this is the severity of the data breach, and that is the reason. See, the data breaches happened in the automobile sector, in the aviation sector, in the brokering firms, and even in the government sector, right? The well-known data breach of 8 crore Indians from the COVID side that happened last year, right? Uh, so this all these data breaches simply state there is a need to protect your data, and that is why the companies of millions and billions dollars worth of revenue are there, which are working to protect your data. Okay, so what is data basically? Data is basically any information that is stored or maybe in use or transmitted, right? Your email, any documents or customer records, these are basically the data, right? They can be categorized in two ways: structured data and unstructured data. Structured data is basically organized and formatted in a very specific way, right? Like the data stored in your database, spreadsheets, CSVs, right? And unstructured data is basically there's no predefined model. It can be in the text, audio, video files, right? And so once you know what is data, it is important to and it is important to protect your data from external threats as well as from internal threats. External threats, like you can put firewalls, you can do network segmentation, you can keep your data away from outside trusted zones, right? But what about internal threats, right? How will you protect the data from your internal threats? So that is why the data classification is important, right? So you know your data and then you classify your data. Okay, so before moving ahead with data classification, let's first understand classification. So classification in simple English terms is basically arranging your data in the groups as per their similar resemblance, right? As an example, let's say in a library, you created the sections like fiction, non-fiction, biography, mystery, right? And then you are keeping the books as per their genre, right? So basically you are categorizing your books. So this is classification in the library, right? But when we are talking about data classification, it is basically the process of categorizing your data as per your maybe some predefined criteria, right? It can be like public, private, confidential. And so once you categorize the data, you will be basically efficiently manage your data and efficiently protect your data. Okay. need of data classification. So data classification is needed for data protection, for the risk management, right? And for your data lifecycle management, and for the compliance and regulatory requirement. So you can basically protect your data if you know, if you have already segregated your data present in the organization, right? And then you can segregate your sensitive data from the general data, right? So, and then you can allocate your resources. Once you identify your sensitive data, you can allocate your resources to protect that critical information that you have identified, right? Data lifecycle management is basically how long are you going to retain your data, right? When are you going to archive your data, or when are you going to securely dispose your data? That is life cycle management. You should know when you created a data, then you should know like when I'm going to for how long it is going to be used, or maybe it is not needed, then I need to securely dispose that data, right? So complete life cycle management of data is needed through data classification. And last but not the least, it's compliance and regulatory requirements. So organizations are basically required by the law to protect the data in a specific way as per the compliance, right? So there are so many compliance around the world, right? I'll just brief you about few of them: GDPR, HIPAA, PCI, and ISO, right? In GDPR, basically, it's talk about the PII level, personal identifiable information, right? So it allows any individual to have control over their personal information, and then it ensures transparency in how organizations are handling their personal information, right? Mostly, it is in European region. They want like all the platforms or wherever the data is being managed, then they should comply to the GDPR. Right? HIPAA is basically on the health records, right? So it gives the control in storing the sensitive health records, right? PCI is basically on the credit card holders, right? So if you are doing any credit card transaction on any platform, then how that platform is securing your financial information, right? And ISO is basically regarding the unauthorized, categorizing based on, based on sensitivity of the information, right? So that you can help in protecting your information from public disclosure. Okay. The next is type of data classification. So on a broader level, you can divide data classification in two parts. One is content based and context based, right? So when I say content, I mean the exact keyword, right? So let's say PII, personal identifiable information, then it will be email address or name. This is the content. And context is basically anything other than content is basically context, like who's the creator of this document, right? Who's the author of this document? Who's this document meant for? So this is all context. Another example could be, let's say, I'm creating a document for my senior team, right? Which includes the internal sales and revenue data. And then when I'm done with this document, I'll share this document with the senior team, right? So in this case, the internal sales and the revenue data, that is the content, right? But context is this document was meant for my senior team, not for me and not for any other individual. So this is the context. Okay. Data classification is a continuous process. This is very important because you can't classify a data in a fixed period of time. It is a continuous process because let me explain you with an example. Let's say you have a flat structure in your organization, right, where everybody is at the same position, right? This mostly happens in the startups, right? So you may not require that much context here, because right now the information can be shared with everyone. Maybe there are just 4 people in the startup, but as your company grows, your hierarchy or structure grows, right? You may want to introduce some structure, like this piece of information now should be visible or accessed by some senior team, not anyone who just joined the company. So as the time grows, you more and more context comes into the picture, right? So like any other framework, this data classification framework matures over the time, right? Okay. The next is data discovery. It's basically identifying and locating the data within your organization's infrastructure, right? Where's your data stored? That's about data discovery. So you begin by identifying all data within your organization. Uh, this includes like structured data and unstructured data, right? And identify the data that needs classification. You should know which data is important to you and which one not. Which data need protection and which one not. Which data maybe if leaked could cause your financial damage or reputational damage. Which data if leaked could affect your business or yeah, basically affects your business and business or brand, right? And then you need to know where this data is stored, at what location in the organization this data is stored, and who all will be accessing this data, and what is the mode of transportation of this data, like email or cloud servers, right? Removable devices. So this is about data discovery. Data tagging. So basically, whatever data you have identified during the data discovery, you need to tag that data. By tagging means adding labels, right? So you can add a label like this is a public data. This is accessible by everyone. This is private data, may be accessible by some certain people, right? Confidential data, very highly secretive data. Maybe it could be your financial records, right? And then maybe you can tag the data as L1, L2, right? So what I'm trying to say is there's no specific way of tagging the data, right? It is data is tagged basically as per your the business needs, right? Example, if you are not under the regulatory compliance and you want to go for ISO audits, right? Then ISO audits basically require the data classification. So in this case, you can classify the data as public, private, confidential, right? And another case will be like, let's say you are facing the data leakage, right? Then you need to protect the IP, intellectual property of your organization, right? Maybe it could be your trademarks, it could be patents, copyrights, proprietary algorithm, source code, right? So in this case, what you will need to do, you will tag the data is like highly confidential IP, confidential IP, publicly disclosed IP, right? And the next level of tagging could be like who is going to access this data, like maybe the development team, the finance team, accounting team, marketing team, right? Another level of tagging could be sorry. Another level of tagging could be like access controls, right? So you can just keep on tagging the data as per your requirement. Okay. So I think I missed one slide. Yeah. So once you have done with data classification, data discovery, data tagging, the next thing is data loss prevention. Like you can implement the data loss prevention at this stage, right? Because you know your data at this point in time. But what happens a lot of time, people just go ahead and start implementing the data loss prevention, right? And this is where it fails, because the thing is they are not sure what is their data. They must have heard about like, oh, all around the world data breaches are happening, so let me just contact a vendor and try to implement the DLP solution, right? So it is not the way. First, you are owning that organization. You are a part of that organization, right? Maybe your security team, uh, security info team, they will first need to understand like what data we have in our organization and what data we need to protect, right? So once you are done this, then you can go and implement the DLP solution. Okay. Now we should understand the objective of DLP, right? There are 4 W's: why, what, where, when, right? So why do you want to implement the DLP solution? Is it because of some threats or regulations, right? What is the data which is in the scope of DLP, right? You identified your data, so you should know what is the data that is in the scope of DLP. Like it is a PII information that you want to protect or health records you want to protect, right? Where's this data located, which is in the scope of DLP? Is it on file servers, cloud, applications, database, right? And when do you want to implement the DLP? Immediately, as and when the data is created, or maybe you require, first you just want to monitor and then you want to implement the DLP solution, right? Then comes the DLP scope, right? So you should know the exact location of data within the scope of DLP. Like if it is stored in the file server, then the file server name, or maybe the IP address, application name, maybe your HR application could be one of that application, and then the cloud providers, right? Anywhere where you are just uploading your documents. Second is you can create the infrastructure diagram for the DLP, like your system and network diagram, how the data, how's your internal network is right now, right? And then you can create the data flow diagrams which are in the scope of DLP. Like you can create the business and operational logic. You can create the data flow diagrams, how your data is flowing through your network. Okay. So the DLP solution that we are implementing is applied on 3 types of data, right? So data that we are trying to protect basically exists in 3 forms. Data could be at rest, in use, or in transit, right? It is very simple. These are very simple terms. So when we say data at rest, means where your data is stored, right? Local disk, file servers, cloud storage, removable medias, right? When I say data in use, when you are creating this data or when you are consuming this data, let's say I open a spreadsheet, I start modifying the data, right? Or I'm querying the database. So this is like data in use. Data in transit, when this data is transmitted, right? Like I'm sending an email containing data, or maybe I'm copying the information to some USB, right? So these are the 3 states of data where your data exit: at rest, in use, or in transit. Okay. So these 3 states of data that we just discussed, this data can be leaked through various channels, right? It can be email, USB, webmails, through FTP, right? So let's see what are the channels. USB. USB means if you are trying to copy your sensitive information to a USB, right? So in this case, that your DLP solution should figure out, oh, this is the sensitive data which is being copied to the USB drive. So let me restrict this copy operation into the USB, right? Or maybe the DLP solution will itself block the USB port. So you will not be able to insert any USB there. Printing, right? Printing is also an important aspect. Like maybe you require printing of the information, right? But if any employee try to print a sensitive information, then DLP should know, oh, this employee is trying to print some sensitive information. Let me block this printing, right? Screenshots, copy paste, servers, copying your information on any file server, right? HTTP, HTTPS, FTP, FTPS, cloud, maybe Dropbox, Drive, right? Bluetooth, right? Sharing the information through Bluetooth, uh, sharing the information through maybe from the enterprise perspective, maybe they are using the Slack, maybe they are sharing through the WhatsApp, right? Social media like Facebook, Instagram, email, right? It could be your Gmail, Office 365. So these are the data channels. These are not the only data channels, right? There are a lot of others. So your DLP solution should protect all the channels through which data can be leaked. Okay. So let's understand the data in use. So DLP solution uh, in this state should prevent the unauthorized use of data, right? If somebody trying to use the data, uh, sensitive data, then the DLP solution should block that. Let's say if I'm trying to get the access of a file which I'm not allowed to, right? Then DLP solution should be able to block that access, right? Uh, it can be done through like the data can be encrypted in this case. Let me give an example here. So in this case, the data in use is basically protected by the authentication, like who is trying to access this data, identity management, right? The IAM solution and the access control, right? So that's how you can prevent the unauthorized use of data. The second is data in transit. So DLP solution in this state should focus on monitoring and controlling the transfer of data between the system and over the networks, right? So let's take an example. If user is trying to send an email, right, which contains some a PII information or maybe the credit card information, right? So in this case, the email DLP solution will analyze the email, will analyze the communication, and maybe it will either block the email or it will send the email in the quarantine state, right? So uh, the prevention method for this will be like encryption is the way uh, we can encrypt the data before it is being sent over the email, right? So encryption can be done at two stages: when it is the data is at rest, right, before sending, or maybe we can uh, encrypt the connection through which the data is being sent. Okay. The next is data at rest. So DLP solution in this state should prevent unauthorized access to stored data, right? If I do not have access, then I should not be able to get uh, access to the stored data, right? And this typically involves basically the encryption. As I mentioned earlier, you can encrypt your stored or sensitive data. You don't need to encrypt all the data. If it is confidential, highly confidential, then only you can encrypt that data. Otherwise, it's not needed. If publicly data is not required to be encrypted. So you can you can encrypt the data. You can have access controls, or you can do the data classification for this data, for the data which is at rest, right? And the important part is this is done by a very uh, one of the important of the DLP solution, which is discovery agent. Okay, so DLP rules. So the rules that you are going to create to protect your data, right? So the rules could be like content-based rules, contextual-based rules, action-based rules, threshold-based rules, and user-based rules, right? Content-based rules basically will analyze the content of the data, right? Uh, Based on some predefined patterns, regex, right? Uh, let's say if I'm sending an email which contains uh, the credit card number, right? So this becomes so my content based rule will say if any user is trying to send the credit card number in an email, then that email should be blocked, right? along with block, maybe an alert should be sent to an admin. So this is how I can create a content-based rule where I'm just targeting one aspect of the data, right? The contextual rules will be the context. It will be basically the context in which data is used by the applications or the users, right? Uh, the example for this can be, let's say, the people working in the finance department can have access to the financial reports, right? And if anyone else who is not a part of finance department, then those persons should not be allowed to access the data. So this is one of the example of the context based, right? Action based will be again, and you can create some action based on if any policy a policy is breached, right? Whatever policies that you are creating, then what action needs to be taken on that. When I'm sending an email, should that email be blocked immediately, or alert should be sent to the admin, or it should be in a quarantine state? So those type of actions can be action based rules can be created. The next one is threshold based rules, right? So maybe defining a upper limit, or when or triggering an alert when that upper limit is exceeded, the threshold is exceeded, right? So for an example, let's say if somebody is trying to download a large amount of data from the company server, right, in a very short span of time, right? So your threshold based rules will detect like some unusual activities have happened, right? So let me block that data, and then maybe again an alert will be sent to the admin like I suspect an unusual activity in the network, right? User based rules will be like applying the policies for your user identities, roles, members. So you can create user-based rules as per the roles, groups, and user identities. Let's say, again, an example of the HR documents which contains the salaries, right? So maybe these documents can be accessed by the senior manager, right? Maybe they are not part of finance team, but maybe the senior manager can see the salaries of the employees, but then same these documents cannot be accessed by anyone else, right? So I'm defining a rule for the users, right? So this is how you can create the rules, and if the rules are then these rules will detect the policies that you have created, and if they found any data breach, then they will maybe send an alert, or maybe encrypt in case data encryption is required. Okay, the next is DLP components, right? So when we say I'll implement my DLP solution, so the basic components is management console, endpoint installer, policy server, email gateway, and discovery agent, right? The information is being accessed on the endpoint. Information is passing through the email gateway, right? So the DLP management console that you are seeing here, you can manage all your devices, right? And the policies that you are going to create over here can be pushed to the DLP policy server, or DLP policy server. And this policy server will basically send the policies to email gateway so that your email communication can be monitored, and on the endpoint where the DLP agent is installed, right? And a DLP agent installer will be a separate service which will basically monitor or manage the agent that you have installed on the endpoints, right? And the discovery agent will basically inspect the one that we discussed during data at rest, right? So discovery server will basically inspect the all your locations where the data is stored, and if they found any confidential information, maybe they will audit and log in the audit and logging server, so that any auditor can investigate what happened during the data breach. So this is a basic architecture of DLP. Okay, so the last thing is the DLP best practices. So what best practices you can remember while implementing the DLP solution, right? So first is identify and classify the data as per your business needs, right? Remember, this will be different as per your organization, right? And when you identify the data, maybe you found some confidential or sensitive data, then you can take an action to encrypt that data, maybe files or the data, right? Then you can enable the access controls, like who is going to access this information, right? The next thing is monitor the data access. Like I have given the access to these people. Now I will also have to monitor that access, like who is accessing this data, when that person is accessing that data, right? The next is conduct the regular security audits. This is really important, because what happened, like if you are doing it regularly, maybe you will found some vulnerabilities in your system, right? So once the vulnerabilities are found, before anyone is reaching out to you for those vulnerabilities, you can take an action to fix those vulnerabilities, right? So these regular security audits is important. Next is educate and train your employees, right? So this is really, again, really important, because everyone who is working in your organization should know, like they are also playing an important role in protecting the data, because sometimes intentionally or intentionally, they may share some sensitive data outside of the organization, right? So they should understand their role in protecting the data. They should know what is the sensitive data and what is not. So if you will educate them, if we will train them, it will be better for the organization.